Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone attending the Planning Committee meeting today, especially those in the public gallery and anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. To the members of the public in the gallery, I would like to remind you that this planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so there is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future. Committee members, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking, and please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic Car Park. Thank you. I think I'll start today by asking all the officers to introduce themselves. Polly, we'll start with you, please.
I'm Polly Ellis, I'm a solicitor with the Council's Legal Department.
Rachel Beer from Democratic Services.
Hello, I'm Richard Lewis, Head of Planning and Development.
Paul Wheeler, Highway Development Control.
Claire Hall, Senior Planner, Development Management.
Rebecca McAndrew, Principal Planner, Development Management.
Norman Jones, Team Leader, Development Management.
Thank you. We'll start the agenda. First item, attendance. If everyone will sign the register as usual. And apologies. Any apologies, Rachel?
I haven't received any apologies, thanks.
Thank you. Richard is now going to explain something to the Planning Committee before we start the meeting. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Can members, at agenda item 9, this relates to the Graig the development. This is recently, since going into print, it's been withdrawn by the applicant, so it can't be considered by committee today, and the application won't be progressed. It's been withdrawn. Also on agenda item 11, relating to the Aldi store, you'll note that the recommendation is for refusal. There's 4 reasons for refusal. This afternoon we received some further information from the applicant to do with the flooding assessment on the canal. We haven't had time to consult on that, and we will need to do that before members make a decision on the application. So this application, I need to defer it. We are hoping to bring it back to the next committee, but it depends on how quickly we can get that information sorted. But it wouldn't be right, it's not possible at the moment to be able to deal with the application without that full information being considered. So I regret that and apologise to members, but it literally was just something that came up this afternoon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. We'll go on to item 2, declarations of interest. Polly, please.
Can I firstly remind members that you need to complete the declaration of interest form in the attendance register folder if you're declaring an interest in any application. The following interests have been declared to me. In relation to agenda item 10, Councillor Stuart Ashley and Councillor Faye Jones declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 10 as members of Cumbrae Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. I don't have any other further declarations, Chair.
Thank you, Polly. Agenda item 4. No, we've got 3, I think, before that, haven't we? Minutes of a meeting of the Planning Committee of Torfaen County Borough Council held on the 16th of October. Do all members agree that these are a true record? They're on pages 5 to 22. Yes? Are there any comments or queries from members? No? We'll note that as a true record then. Thank you. Item 4, annual performance report for planning. So over to Richard Lewis again. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, Members will be aware that from 2015 there's a requirement for us to submit an annual performance report to Welsh Government to assess our performance against nationally set targets, and also in conjunction with other local planning authorities across Wales. Probably the most important part of this, if you turn to pages 44 and 45, these are really the criteria that we are assessed against. It's a traffic light system, so green represents good performance, yellow or amber represents fair performance, and red is where we need to improve. As far as this 17-18 financial year performance is concerned, we've scored good in 9 out of the 13 indicators and fair in 3 out of 13 indicators. The one area where we're in need of improvement is to do with the housing land availability. However, members will recall that we dealt with that at the AMR, the annual monitoring review at Council in October, where we explained the position with that. So on that basis, we're slightly better than we were last year. It's not a bad performance, but obviously members are asked to note the report, and if you've got any questions on the report, I'm quite happy to try and answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Jason?
Yeah, just a quick comment. Where in the future we receive these reports that use the colour-coded system, it would be quite handy to have them in colour. Thank you.
And I acknowledge that, yes.
Are there other questions, comments? The report? Stuart?
Can I move acceptance, please?
Yes. All members agree to note and accept the report. Thank you. We'll move on. Item 5, which is so the next 4 items, 5, 6, 7 and 8, they are appeals against decisions. And you've all got separately reports from the Planning Inspectorate. Right. First one is appeal by Mr and Mrs Brown against the decision of the Council to issue an enforcement notice on relation to an unauthorised conservatory at 9 South Avenue, Sebastopol. And this application, the appeal was dismissed, an enforcement notice upheld. Any questions, comments from members on that? No? Stuart again?
Move note that we note. Is it noting on this one, Chair?
Yeah, we note these. Yes. All agree to note this one?
Yeah.
Thank you. And the next one, appeal dismissed in refusal of retrospective application to retain 2 Forest View, Hentless, Cwmbran. This one was dismissed as well. Any questions, comments?
Noting again?
We all note it? Okay. Thank you. On to the next one. Item 7. Appeal against refusal for demolition of existing redundant garage and construction of new 3-bedroomed lodge, Osborne House, Newport Road. And this one was, the appeal was dismissed as well. Right.
Noting.
Right. All agree to note it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. 8. We got another one. Appeal against refusal, demolition of existing bungalow and replacement with new residential property, Hillcrest Bungalow, Kevin Crib Road, Pantygasseg. Thank you. We all note this application. As you just heard, 9 has been withdrawn from the applicant. So we go to item 10, and Rebecca McAndrew, you'll present this application, and the application is 17/P/914 FUL, and is proposed hybrid application comprising full planning application for 22 residential dwellings and associated access, public open space, landscaping and engineering works, an outline planning application for A1 retail land use of the remainder of the site, with all matters reserved apart from layout and access. It's an amended scheme and it's land off Newport Road, Llantarnam, Cwmbran. It's on pages 111 to 155. And we had a planning committee site inspection on the 5th of June. So it's over to you, please, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you. So the application is submitted by Redrow Homes for a residential development and a retail core in Llantarnam. The application forms part of the wider Llantarnam Strategic Action Area, which was designated in the LDP for a mixed-use community, which was proposed to include employment, housing and a neighbourhood centre. Outline consent for the strategic area was granted in 2015, and this included outline consent for a retail centre with 25 residential units above on the application site that we're considering at the moment. The current application varies from the outline consent, therefore this is a standalone application. And the application that we currently considered is a hybrid application, so the residential development for 22 houses is a full application, 22 2- and 3-bed houses, and the outline application for the retail centre with access and layout to be considered. So this is the proposed layout. This is a new scheme to what was submitted originally. There was a lot of debate and negotiation over the original scheme over a matter of months. Officers were concerned that the layout of the original scheme didn't meet the standard of design that we wanted to achieve on this quite key site within Llantarnam, which would serve both the new residents of the wider strategic area and Llantarnam itself as the village core. So Redrow submitted a revised scheme which we think addresses our original concerns. If I just talk you through the scheme. So starting at the bottom, there's this village green area, this is larger than was originally proposed. You can see that we've got corner properties addressing that village green area and dual aspect properties through the site as well. So Redrow have amended the scheme to include bespoke houses which are designed to fit this site rather than just using the conventional designs from other sites. And there's this important route through the site, so because the retail area is going to be in the north, it was thought important to make sure that pedestrian links through the site to the shops for the existing residents south in Llantarnam was important. So there'd be this route through the village green and up through the retail, up through the residential area, through this shared surface area. These 5 property shares, so this one, this one, this one and this one, have got a reduced level of parking, and there's 3-bedroom properties, so they'd have 2 spaces rather than the 3 spaces that would normally be required. But I think as officers we thought this was an important concession to make, just to be able to sort of get those cars off the street and improve that visual route through the site. So you can see now the parking areas are in parking courts. A key feature as well was the original scheme submitted. We were concerned that it's quite a green wooded area, quite green in character, and we were concerned about the impact of the development on the green character. So Redrow have gone away now and come back with this scheme where there's a substantial buffer between existing residents on Teacock Lane and the proposed houses. I think it's about 12.75 metres approximately, and that would retain the green character of Teacock Lane, which is quite a historic lane. The scheme also proposes improvements to the junction of Pentra Lane and Newport Road around here, and I've got a more detailed slide of that, so I'll come on to that afterwards. And then this is the outline area up here for the retail. As I said, layout and access are to be considered at this point. So the access would be would share the access with the residential, which is that route there is to the Redrow scheme that's currently under construction. So it'd be off that main access route in there, parking at the front. retail units at the back. So if we just go and have a look at some of the house designs, just to explain. So these at the top are the corner properties that face onto the village green. You can see here that they've got a quite an interesting configuration, but they would address that village green area, which is quite attractive. And this is just an example of the dual aspect property. So so on the side, normally you'd maybe have one or two smaller windows, but a bay window's been added onto this, so when you're walking through that route through the site, it'd be quite an attractive elevation rather than the blank elevation. Here's some street scenes. So again, quite attractive. You can see here where there's a bespoke design. So these properties would have their cars would park undercroft, and there'd be access to 2 parking spaces behind that as well. So keeping those cars off the main route through, off the street, which is welcomed. So we've received a landscape strategy as part of the application. If I just run you through that, because obviously one of the main concerns was the previous scheme lost the green character of the site, so this is a much improved scheme. So if I start at the top, this is actually outside the application site, but this is an area of land that Redrow own, which is on the opposite side of the main access route through to the cottage site, which is under construction. So as part of this development, that would be planted with trees, wooded, which would be, a bonus to get that, the visual amenity of that improved. This year then, there's a line of poplar trees which would be retained. This bit here is the green buffer between the residents on Pentra Close and the new residents. And then also on Newport Road, which if you think when you drive down there, down towards the roundabout at the bottom, that's quite green at the moment. So the hedgerow and trees along that edge would be retained, and this little bit down here, I think the hedge stops there now at the moment, but we would get additional hedge planting down there, so it's all about keeping that greenery. You can see the village green there, and generally we just think this would retain that green character of that area. So this is just to show the highways improvement that's proposed. So there's this junction here is improved. There's a footpath going along there towards the Blackbird's pub. Crossing points so that people coming from the south can cross over and go through that route through the site up to the shops. And then the residents of this property here were concerned because at the moment the highway backs up to their property, and there's a marginal strip proposed now along there, so it offers them some a bit of a buffer between the highway itself and their property, and of course pedestrians could use that as well. So in terms of Section 106, the level of Section 106 for this site is reduced from what would normally be required. We've thought about this quite deeply as officers, and we think that actually we're willing to accept as officers a much lower Section 106 because we see that as a way of securing a very good design at this site, and we see that to be sort of the important thing in this instance. So nonetheless, there is some Section 106. So the highway works would be done into the Section 106, approximately £65,000 that would cost, and the landscaping works would cost around £35,000. But there wouldn't be any affordable housing in this case, unfortunately, but it's a balance, and officers are happy with that balance. So there was quite a lot of local opposition to the first scheme. Main issues were the highways works and querying whether that was safe or not, and then the landscaping and the whole, is the village green big enough? We're going to lose those trees between our properties and the site, and just the whole impact upon the green character of the area. And a ward member raised concerns against the application on that same basis. So we've undertaken a reconsultation process on the new scheme. We've had 2 responses which are detailed in the report. We put in the report if there were any that came after the agenda was printed, we'll report those. We haven't received any further comments, just to confirm that. The Lantern and Residents Association welcome that green buffer now between Teacock Lane and the new residential properties, and they had some queries about the highways improvements, but our highways officer was happy with this scheme, and he's been quite involved in negotiating that, so we're satisfied with that. Show you some photos now. So the top ones stood looking, that's the junction that would be improved, looking down towards the Blackbird. So you can see there this wooded boundary down on Newport Road. The pedestrian crossing points there would be included, so it would be a much more pedestrian-friendly environment. And then, I don't know if you can see down the bottom, but that's looking sort of from the junction into the new Redress site off Newport Road, so you can see that line of poplars would be retained there. And then this green bit there would be the landscaping to the front of the retail area. Oh, this is looking back now across from Pentra Lane to the junction with Newport Road, so pavement would go in there, pedestrian, the crossing points there and there, and then this here you can see where the highway comes up to the rear boundary of this property, so that would have a marginal strip to offer it some leeway now. This goes ahead. I don't know if you can see the top one, but this is just looking down Teacock Lane, just appreciating that existing wooded character that we wanted to safeguard. And again here the properties on Teacock Lane, the existing ones, and then that green character with all the trees on the site opposite that we've been discussing. So the recommendation here is to approve subject to the section 106. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Questions from the committee? Jason and then Ron.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to double check with you about the buffer zone and those trees and hedges. It was a concern when we went on the site visit. So I just want to double check that the trees and hedges that run along, I think it's Teacock Close, will be retained and not be affected in any way going forward.
So this is the landscape strategy we received. This is the line of poplar trees here that you could see, so they'd be retained. This is the hedgerow to be retained, and then this area then is the buffer. You can see there's trees in there. So what we'd be looking at as part of the conditions would be for the strategy for that site, so to look at which trees would be retained. There may be some poor quality ones that would need to come out, and there may be then some additional planting to improve that buffer. So, but it's definitely the wooded buffers that are going to be there.
Ronnie?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rebecca. Retail units you've said about. Can you be more specific? I mean, all you've said is retail units, and how many retail units and what they consist of?
Yeah. So at the moment is in outlines. We've got the layout, but there's 743 square metres of retail units. So it shows there one larger one, three smaller ones. We don't know who the occupants would be yet, but I imagine there'd be a convenience store there, we would hope, and some smaller other shops.
Yeah. Thank you. No, looking at it, it's such a small development, and I thought it seems they can be split up. There's quite a few retail units for just a small development. That's all. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the sort of size of your your Tesco local, or your Sainsbury local, or your little co-op, and then the smaller units then would be, I guess, on a whichever comes forward.
And just one other question on you said what the planting areas, and through my years and years of experience on planning, some of these developers have planted some horrendous things on what we call their landscaping, very thin sometimes. Do we have any control what they're going to be planting on there? Because if they're going to be planting, just say, Elaeagnus, which grows prolific and creates a lot of work every year, and I've said before on planning, we should be looking at these planners and when they're landscaping, is low maintenance planting and self-maintaining planting.
Yeah. Am I on? I think so. Yeah, so we've had the landscape strategy in, which is there. This came in quite late in the day, so what we're proposing to do, although we're happy with that strategy, we'd attach a landscaping scheme to make sure that we're happy with the actual detail of it. I mean, these areas would be tree planting, I guess, and this down here would probably follow sort of native hedgerow. But then when it came down to internal planting within the development site itself, we'd be asking our landscape architect to have a look at that and just whether they would support that or make any comments or make recommendations or something. But, yeah, so. And there'd also be, sorry, I should say that, a management plan as part of Section 106 to look after the landscape,
yes, yeah.
which is important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alan, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. This development is very far removed from the original design and access statement that was for the strategic action area. I've got a copy of it here. There was supposed to be 1.3 hectares of open space, for example, on a site of 2.5 hectares. There's nowhere near that there, is there?
I mean, if you look at this in the context, there is quite a lot of open. So there's this at the front here, in front of the existing houses, proposed houses, sorry, this in front of the retail area. The village green is quite a good usable size. So for this level of development, there's probably there's a good level of open space on that. If you look at the site within the and obviously this area at the top as well, if you look at this in the context of the wider strategic area, which the design and access statement that you're referring to, there's a substantial over-provision of public open space within the wider strategic area due to, well, so we think that actually there is a good level of public open space on this site and within the wider area.
To come back in, Alan? Yes.
Please, Chair. The area to the north of there, the public open space to the north, that strip across there is under a pylon easement area, so I don't really see that counts as open space. There were no provision for 20-odd houses on the original scheme. I just think this is so far removed. As well as that, we're talking about a removal of 1,800 square metres of trees compared to what we got there now. Well, that's what the report says. We also get no Section 106 money and no affordable housing. I mean, I didn't want to just go down and build it for them.
Yeah, and notwithstanding that there'd be pylons over some of the public open space, it is still classed as public open space. I think the levels of trees that you're referring to being removed were of the previous scheme, not the current scheme. So that was the scheme that we were really unhappy with, and that's why we've now negotiated those additional buffers, the bigger village green and the green across and the planting to the top as well. So yeah, I think it's the original scheme that we were unhappy with that was that, yeah.
Okay, Alan? Okay, Faye next, then Steve.
I'd just like to ask, hi, it's Faye Jones, thank you. It's me. Oh, I'm coming up as a gainer, but that's fine, I think. I'd just like to ask, is the roads that they propose going to be wide enough? Because on the development they've got one good sized road with residential housing both sides and one very small road which leads off to the social housing with a very small pavement and hardly any parking. So I'm very concerned there's going to be enough parking for the retail spaces. As much as I welcome the retail spaces, I hope there's going to be enough parking, and I hope that the council will watch what Redrow do, because I'm sure they didn't have a good look at how they built the existing houses with the roads that they've got there now.
Paul, Highways, come in with us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd probably refer to the existing development that Redrow have got there currently. The width of the road is 4.8 on a cul-de-sac, and that's normal. And they try and constrain the widths of roads these days to try and constrain the speed. So the roads that are there currently are adequate. In fact, the standards say that you can actually go lower than 4.8, but we never do. Within this particular development, if you see the road that is coloured in white, that is an adoptable standard road, which is a road which is either 4.8 or 5.5 metres wide with normal footways on. When you go to the road as you see it on that plan, this colour, it looks like probably brown or grey, is it, Rebecca? If you could point to it, please. See that your shared surface road? See we call that a shared surface road. And standard advice from government and in manuals for streets is that you share these surfaces. They're very calm, very quiet, very low speed, and it's shared between pedestrians and traffic. Now, this is a normal thing that they promote these days. In some instances, we actually ask for some sort of refuge between the carriageway and the road, so we would have what we call a marginal strip, which does allow people to actually walk on, but the idea is that is one shared surface. With the design of this development, Rebecca, myself and the applicant actually spent a long time trying to get the layout here which would make it a development which is basically in accord with Manual for Streets. For so long, developers have built streets and built roads, built houses that are not nice places to live. They are sometimes the roads are that much covered with car parking areas adjacent to the roads or parallel to the roads that it just looks awful. You just wouldn't want to live there and be there. What we tried to do with this development is encourage the parking areas to be away from the roads enclosed with development, and the roads to be restricted in width, very short cul-de-sacs, so it gives a feeling of a place that children want to be, people want to be, and that the speeds of vehicles are low. So, to be honest, we thought this was a real good opportunity to get something here which was far removed from what was submitted in the first instance, and something of real quality. And a small part of that was a very, very small reduction in parking provision, simply to not have all these cars cluttered around the street and on street. So from a highway standpoint, we thought this was a real betterment than what was previously submitted. Thank you, Chair.
Could I just come back in?
Thank you, Paul. Yes, you can come back in. Yes, Paul, please, yes.
Okay, so if I could just explain that situation there. This is a strategic development area, and part of this area is, I don't know if you call it industrial development, but it's factory development in effect. So the wide road that you see, the link road that comes in off Newport Road, the main road, see the main road at the top of the plan? That is 6.1 metres wide, which is quite wide. Plus there's a wide footway for cycle link as well. But that is wide because it will eventually lead to an industrial estate. So that road has heavy goods vehicles and all the rest of it, or will have eventually. So that is the reason why that is wide. That road then leads back again then into a residential area. And off that residential area is that road that you're actually referring to as a narrow road. Well, as I explained, that road is narrow, but it is within the standards, and within the standards you can actually go narrower than that, which is what we don't like to do. But throughout the borough and throughout new developments, there are roads that are 4.8 metres wide, and there are developments that these developments have 3 parking spaces primarily, 1 in a garage and 2 off street. So they are in accordance with the standards. I take your point because I have had discussions, or not correspondence, from a person that actually lives there that actually says about the width of the road. But, as I explained to the person, it is width, a standard width. So I think there is somebody there that actually complains about the width of the road, but the other 60 people that live there don't complain. Thank you.
Can I just back that up? My son lives there. I find it very hard to visit him because of the parking, and I always have to park quite a long way and walk down no matter what the weather is. And I see cars coming round sometimes, and he has a 2-year-old child, and I'm very concerned at the narrowness. And then you go one street down, and it's beautifully wide, and yet they haven't got the social housing office. They won't really have to use it quite as much. And there are 2 parking spaces outside his house and his neighbour's house, and several others. And I'm worried that when the retail park comes, it'll put more pressure on those parking spaces.
Okay. No, you're finished. Right, thank you. Steve and then Alan.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. The first one is a concern of mine. I'm concerned that local people have not got a chance for affordable home. You know, that's my key one at the moment. And the other one is air quality with this increased traffic is going to be environmentally damaging and for the biodiversity in that area. So what are we going to do with that?
Who wants to answer that?
Yeah, just your point regarding the affordable homes is noted. Just in this instance, we take a balanced judgment in terms of do we achieve a good design there, or and get a low level of Section 106, or do we hold out and get the full Section 106 ask? There are affordable houses being built elsewhere within the wards, I'm aware of that, so yeah, a point taken. And just noted what you say about the air pollution. We haven't had any objections from our environmental health officers on that point, but thank you.
It's probably worth noting, we have spent an awful long time with Red Road to come up with this scheme. We think this is a key site. It's part of a wider development of 300 to 400 houses. The one lot is already being developed, and that development paid for quite a lot of road improvements and affordable housing. And there's another development on the other side of the Newport Road, which we're also negotiating with at the moment, which will have Section 106 requirements. It's always a balance. It was always envisaged that there would be housing on this site. The landscaping was very important, and this issue of trying to develop a village core with the shops as well is a very tricky balance. So we spent quite a long time with Redrow trying to strike that right balance, and we believe with this scheme that we have struck that right balance, but acknowledging that other sites we are looking to get affordable housing and other improvements as well as part of that wider development.
Thank you. Alan next, and then Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the parking issue, it's okay to say that you relax the parking because you want fewer cars, but the reality is, if they should have 3 car parking spaces, then they should have 3 parking spaces, because as 8 is 8, they can have 3 cars. I mean, even people with no parking provision in the older estates, they've still got 2 or 3 cars if they've got a 3-bedroom house. I mean, all this is going to encourage is on-street parking somewhere. They're going to park somewhere, and it's just, to me, it's almost like a fantasy to try and, if we've got parking standards, then we should adhere to them. What's the point of having standards if you're not going to uphold them? I just don't see the sense. The only sense I see is they're trying to ram as many houses on this as they can. I mean, in the original plan, the accommodation and the residential area is supposed to be flats above the shops, leaving more open space. They're just throwing that out of the window, it seems to me. And I just think it's just storing up problems for the future, because they will park somewhere. Thank you.
Paul, please answer.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Slade. On any development, there's always a balance to be struck between good development, quality development, green belts, footway provision, links to other areas, and car parking provision. Within this development, we always use the parking standards as a starting point. That is our starting point. No doubt about it, it always is. And we have long discussions, I have long discussions with planning officers, and my aim is always to come to those standards or somewhere near them. They are not cast in stone, they are standards whereby you should try to achieve. But there are minimum standards. And it is a case that if I continue along a route that instead of having 27 parking spaces, I insist that I want 29. And for the sake of 2 spaces, it makes our development all the better. I'm afraid I'll go for a better development any time, rather than losing 1 or 2 parking spaces. Now, our standards that we have in Torfaen are high compared to some other authorities, particularly in England, and our standards are national throughout Wales. And in fact, I actually wrote the original standards. So I'm aware, through surveys and through all the work that we've done throughout the years with developments and looking at developments of how parking works within developments. And we can all say, yeah, they park on the road. The fact of the matter is, no matter how much you provide them, sometimes you provide them with 3 spaces, they'll park 2 on the road and they'll fill their garages up with junk. So, there always is a balance and there is an argument to be struck, and we believe that if we stick out as we normally do to stay near the standards, but if we compromise along our lines slightly in some way, I'm comfortable with that. I haven't got a real issue with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Stuart, next.
I think I'm going to get on to my favourite subject a bit now as well. On the site visit, I noticed that the hedgerow, which is apparently coming out a bit on this development, is the one that links up on the narrow road that goes on Pentra Lane. What concerned me about that and the area was, one, how you get out on the Pentra Lane. Obviously, that's the natural linkage down onto Cycleway and into town. And I noticed in this application there's various linkages for walking, active travel, the rest of it. That was one aspect of this. The other was Alan's concern about trees and the green infrastructure in there. Now, we've got a site here, across there, you've got basically, which is parkland for Llantarnam Abbey. We're kind of losing that kind of losing that feel of this place by the amount of development we've got here and taking out the trees. Now, that's 2 aspects, isn't it, there? How do we maintain that? Because that is actually one of the attractive points of this site. And I'm beginning to worry, when we start putting lots of houses and stuff in, you're going to actually lose that if you take the trees out. There are 2 issues there, aren't there?
Rebecca, please.
So, firstly, coming on to the cycling and the pedestrian routes, there's a condition regarding the wider site, the wider strategic area in terms of cycling routes, which is looking for signage to link down to the canal, so that would come under the wider outline application conditions rather than this one. And then in terms of the trees, I don't know if you've seen the original scheme submitted, but the original proposals were to take these properties right bang up next to that hedgerow, and we were really concerned there about how close driveways were going, residential courtages right up to that hedgerow, taking all those trees out. this scheme is a massive move from the original scheme. I think we've got like 12.5 metres approximately depth of buffer there that would retain the trees and the greenery between the existing properties and existing Teahope Lane, maintaining that green character, and also along Newport Road there as well, that swathe of, I think I've got photos somewhere. This one, so this down here would be retained, and in fact further down where there is a gap we'd be having more hedgerow planting down there. So the original scheme, I think the figure that Councillor Slade referred to was the original scheme, and we didn't think that was acceptable to take that level of green infrastructure out there, albeit it was being replanted. It takes a long time to regrow and re-establish, but we think that this scheme would retain that green character of the area. Our landscape architect has looked at it and she's happy with this proposal, and we think this is a significant improvement, and we would hope that it would safeguard the green character of the area.
Back if I may, Chair. I mean, one of the aspects of this is I noticed through the report you've got there, it seems to be an evolution, but the aspect that Ron brought up as well about planting like for like or planting appropriately, I do support. It's not a case of putting, and we've had that elsewhere with this throughout Cwmbran. If you've got a character, a tree or plant or shrub in an area, and then going away from what is natural, and certainly around this area because it's historically sensitive, I think must be very important on this site because of the nature of it. It's 200 or 300 years old, some of the stuff around there. But that, if we go away and it starts looking like what it is in the state, this, I think, is the issue. Maybe it's that, and it is quite an historic landscape here, not different from other aspects. And that is the aspect, I suspect, that we're looking at was problematical for people. Now, the other aspect of why I brought the cycleways and things in, because you've actually got historical ways going through this as well, and it struck me immediately when I was listening to the rest of this, things like Pentra Lane and the other, if we retain those as the active routes, it's an aspect I hadn't thought of until I was listening to what you were saying here. I mean, going down to the canal or going down the walkways is something we ought to retain as the character of the place. And I've been learning something somewhere else on this. This is why I'm bringing this in to some extent. Not something maybe I thought of before, but in aspects of the built landscape and the ecological landscape. And I know your ecological person, your landscape architect does do this, but that character of this landscape is probably more important than anywhere else in Cwmbran.
Our landscape architect's been quite heavily involved in the evolution of the scheme, and I know that she's keen to get native planting there rather than ornamental planting. So yeah, I think that she's good, she's involved, and she'll be continuing to do that through the discharge of conditions as part of the outline application. So we've made sure that because Teahope Lane is quite an important pedestrian route, that lane down towards the parkway is quite widely used for leisure. So as part of that, we've got the that link through the site and throughout the side of the site improve with the and as I said, there's signage due to come to facilitate that whole use. And it's about knitting the existing, knitting the proposed development from the wider strategic area and this site into the existing in terms of the sustainable forms of transport like pedestrian routes and cycleways. So yeah, you're right.
Thank you. Janet, did you want to come in?
Just a comment. I'm really glad that we can retain the greener areas and the hedgerows, but who's going to be responsible for maintaining these hedgerows? The residents, the developer Redrow, or is it going to come back on us as Turbine Council?
Yeah, the maintenance plan would be secured as part of the Section 106, and it would be for the, I imagine the residents then would it'd be a management company, so it would be done through that way. Thank you.
Stuart, do you want to come in again?
Yeah. How long does that maintenance plan last for, and is that dependent on the arrangements with the residents?
Well, we want the landscaping on the site to be retained in perpetuity. Forever, yeah.
Is that a surcharge from the residents?
It'd be through a management company, so I understand that's a normal procedure in that respect.
Right. Did you want to come back in? Faye, you want to come back in?
Thank you. I just wondered, does that mean they're all unadopted roads leading to the retail park as well?
Highways, please.
Yeah, the road leading to the wider road, which is the industrial link road that I talked about earlier, that's subject to a highways agreement to adopt it when it's all completed. The road that is leading into this site, the intention would be to enter into agreement so that road leading into the site would be adopted. That is the intention. What we can never guarantee, although we try to persuade the developer to do that, what we can never guarantee is that they will actually enter into an agreement with us. But always our intention is that, and we normally put a condition on the planning consent that the roads be to adoptable standard. So at least if they don't enter into an agreement with us, at least they are to a proper standard. And likewise, the road that leads to your daughter's house, you said, the son's house, that's subject to an agreement, or not subject to agreement, but it is part of an adoption procedure in any event.
Sorry, I believe that's an unadopted road, that particular road. Yes, and...
they are unadopted until they're completed, until they get signed off. And I'm discussing with Redrow currently the adoption of those roads in that particular area. The one that won't be adopted is the one now that continues down into the lower Malton site, and that's simply because they did not want to enter into any agreements with us. But they would be aware of that under the search procedures in any event.
Can I just say something? It seems to be that whenever we've got big corporations who are doing developments, land builders, they seem to get away with a lot more than the individual little people who put in smaller applications.
Oh. Richard, you're going to
I've got to say, in this particular case, we've worked long and hard with Redrow. This wasn't a scheme that Redrow originally wanted to do. They have, I think, from the point of view that the original objectives for the site were already set out, and the supporting information, we wanted to get as close to that as we could. We believe, and it says in the conclusion to the report, that we've met those objectives in this new scheme, which we as officers are really pleased about, because it gives us everything that we wanted on the site, albeit affordable housing can't be achieved on there because of viability. That's also part of policy, is where we can't get viability. That's a reason for choosing what can and can't be done. In this particular case, it was really important that we got the landscaping right, and we do believe we've got that in this case.
Stuart?
I like to believe that we've got a development here with unadopted roads on it. It's something councillors are not very keen on.
All developments are unadopted until such time that they are up to a satisfactory standard that we will adopt them. On this particular development, that road leading into it isn't even built yet, so we, through condition, would hopefully encourage the developer, because a highways agreement is not mandatory. You do not have to enter into it, but we do encourage them through other methods to enter into those agreements with us so that those roads become adopted. And we've had substantial success in Torvine since I've been here. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but we've had substantial success in Torvine and my predecessor in getting 99% of industrials of roads adopted. What's happened in the past 2 years is that developers, for some reason, have decided amongst themselves that they don't want to put these roads up for adoption, probably because they don't want to pay our fees, possibly. I don't know. That could be an issue. They don't want to get a bond. That could be an issue. But we always encourage them to do that, and we are quite successful at it. So in this instance, the intention would be to adopt the roads.
Thank you. Jason, I think you'll be the last.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to move to accept the officer's recommendation in the report, please.
The seconder? Thank you. Right, you ready to vote on it? For the officer's recommendation? For approval, we vote on it? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11, is it? Those against? 1, 2, 3. Any abstentions? No. This application has been approved. Thank you. Right, well, as item 11 has been deferred, that's the end of the meeting. I thank you all for your contributions, and I'll close the meeting.